Welcome to the Fulfillment Project podcast. I'm your host, Simply Sarah, and I'm so glad that we've connected here today. I've created a series called Life Chats. This is a 4-part series of each of my amazing guests as I take you on a journey through their awakening process. My aim and goal for this show is to give you, the seeker, a container to explore your own growth as you awaken and step into more alignment, more joy, and more fulfillment every single day. Welcome back to the Fulfillment Project Life Chat series. Emma, welcome back for part 3.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, we had a juicy part 1 and part 2. If you haven't watched or listened to it, go back. We are talking all about toxic relationships, recovering from it. Emma went through what we have labeled as a catastrophic breakup back in 2019, where her entire relationship of what she thought it was really wasn't. And there was a lot of lying and deception, and her coming out of that and breaking down patterns. And I condone you so much, Emma, for actually recognizing your, I'll say, part in it. I was going to say fault, but your part in this, because there are always two dynamics to every situation that manifests.
Right. I coming out of that, it was like being hit by a train of realization. Like, I'm the common denominator. Why have so many of my relationships been like this? I'm the common denominator. I'm the consistent factor in all of these relationships. So what am I doing to contribute to this?
Yeah. And that's such a mature, wise perspective to look at, because if we want change, we need to look at our part in it. And we're going to chat about that in this episode of you starting to date again and what that was like and what you were looking out for. And you're in an incredible relationship right now that we want to talk about, which is completely different, and how you went about that, because I'm sure there's so many women who are watching or listening here who maybe have been through a bad breakup, or they're recognizing the same pattern that they're in with relationships. And a lot of the times we're like, oh, I'll just get rid of them because they're the problem.
Right.
But I take me with you, you take Emma with you. Yeah. And there are dynamics to that we all contribute to every situation that we're in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's so important to, we can't change other people, right? That's really what a major realization that I've come to, no matter how much we do for them, no matter how much we try to guide them, whatever, we can't change other people. It's up to them to put in the work and make changes if they even realize that changes need to be made. So ultimately, like, all we can really do is focus on ourselves and, really assess like why we make the choices that we make and what that leads to and where that's coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Even through your breakup, I learned a lot. It made me look at different aspects of my relationship. But I can say my relationship with Joe even grew from watching what you went through. And one of the things that I really recognized with you, and I know you had this realization as well, is like, we teach people how to love us.
Yes, absolutely. We set our own boundaries, whether you realize it or not.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was all part 1. We were breaking down what went on there. Part 2, we were chatting about, you took a year off, you had therapy, you gave yourself a lot of space, that healing time to step away, recognize the things that you needed to change. And now let's talk about dating again.
Yeah.
And so getting back into dating, I know there was some fear, because you saw how you played out the last few relationships of yourself. You knew that you had done some work, but what was that like, knowing that you wanted to get, I'll say, like, back into the dating game?
Scary. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Like I was really, I was afraid of like falling back into another relationship. And prior to my last ex that we spoke about, my relationship prior had similar, like talking points. It was almost like point for point the same, even though they were very different people. Things kind of fell apart in the same way. There were similar mismatches in dynamic and imbalances in the relationship. So, after that first, I would say, relationship fell apart, I was only single for like 3 months. Like I had been ready to move on for a while. Like that relationship was kind of dying slowly, and I saw that. So I didn't allow myself to be like single for very long and really internalize what I had learned, if anything. And quite frankly, at that time, like I didn't really see as much of my own part in it. Like it wasn't as obvious to me that I had made choices to be with this person and choices to allow them to treat me like this and all that. So I, when I was single for like 3 months and then fell back into another relationship and just immediately repeated all of the exact same mistakes all over again. I was like head over heels. So I'm like, benefit of the doubt. It was, I look back now and I'm like, geez, like, what was I just like,
Mhm.
what was I
It's
thinking?
interesting because
I wasn't thinking.
yeah, there's that phrase "love is blind," which is very common. I think a lot of
Right.
people have heard of that, but I also believe lust is very blind as
Oh
well.
yeah, that feeling of limerence at the beginning of a relationship where everything, I mean, realistically, what we're talking about is dopamine, like you're high. That's why it feels so good. It's the same thing as being on a great drug,
Yes, yes.
So yeah, so I was very I was nervous to step back into the dating scene. I was not, I knew that I didn't want anything serious for a while, but at the same time, it was almost like I had to test what I had learned so far. So I had to like, I don't want to say like use dating like a testing ground, but it sounds so cold. I love meeting people. I love hanging out with people. It's one of the things I really enjoy about my business is meeting new people. So from that aspect, like it was cool to like meet new people and, really like check in with what I was feeling in my gut, because that's something that I had ignored for so long. I didn't value what my gut was telling me for so long, red flags, whatever. So I would go on dates and have a great time. Like I didn't have any bad dates, thankfully. I mean, I didn't really date like that much. But had a good time. But I would check in with myself after, like, what's the energy that I'm sensing here? What's my gut telling me? That sort of thing. And I came along some people that were like more needy, which is fine. Some people need more support and whatever. But to me, that was like, run.
Yes,
Like,
yeah,
because past Emma would have like been all over that. Like, please let me help you with everything and just be your mom. Please let
yeah,
me mother you. you
yeah.
know? So I knew that was a bad match for me because I didn't have great boundaries with that in the past. So to me, that was a big red flag. It was almost like less to do with them and more to do with me. Like it would bring out bad patterns in me to be with somebody like that. So it really helped me, you know, I guess get a lay of the land
Yeah.
and also use it like a mirror to myself. Like, what am I feeling here? Why is this good? Why is this bad? Why am I feeling this? Really, really take a conscious approach,
Yeah.
and actually value what my gut was saying. Yeah.
Yeah, because we can do the first step to change is awareness, but
Right.
without making a different decision in the moment, change never happens.
Right.
So we can
Yeah.
have all this awareness, but yeah, like what you said, you're really put to the test when you're like
Right.
in the arena. What am I
Yeah.
seeing? What am I sensing? What's happening here? And I think
Yeah.
that was just so wise to check in with yourself.
Yeah. It's funny because I think I mentioned it in one of the previous episodes where I spoke to that numerologist, went in with no expectations, like what's going to come of this. And at one point, without knowing me like at all, she was like, if I put you in a room full of men, you'll choose the broken one. So that stuck with me, like, oh my gosh, yeah, I have this thing with my ego where I have to feel like I'm responsible for bringing someone up, for fixing them, for being, so important to them that their life changes. Like, where is that coming from?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So going into dating I tried to be more conscious, more aware.
Did you also feel like you didn't know what you were looking for because of all the past patterns? If we don't
Yes.
know anything different, we don't know what we're
Right.
looking for. And if we're
Yep.
used to, I'll use the word toxicity within a relationship, sometimes we don't know, okay, well, what is the opposite of
Oh,
toxicity?
absolutely. Yeah. I didn't know what healthy love really felt like. All of my relationships had an element of toxicity to them. Granted, I didn't have a lot of relationships. I'm like a serial monogamous is what I jokingly called it. Like my first relationship ever out of high school was 7 years long. It lasted until the end of my undergraduate. And then my second relationship was 5 years and then 4 years. So I did not have a lot of experience actually like dating or just being by myself, like
Mhm.
being single in some capacity, learn who am I outside of a relationship.
Yeah. Do you think you stayed in those relationships so long because they were feeding your wounds as well? And, I guess
Oh,
meeting
absolutely.
that trauma bond that we talked about in the past episodes?
Absolutely. Yeah. They were meeting, or the wounds matched in some
Mm,
ways. And also, I had some like poor boundaries. Like I had one ex who, well, two really, that were extremely insecure and jealous. And I mean, like controlling to the point of control. And to me, I give the benefit of the doubt to people. I'm like, oh, they're like this because of X, Y, and Z. Not like this is unacceptable behavior. It's like
mhm.
they're just broken. I have a big heart for people. I see, I have a lot of empathy, and I see that no one person is all good or all bad. There's so much that plays into that. So yeah, I definitely think it fed into my wounds and my ego as
Yes.
well. Yeah.
And when you don't know that healthy, stable love, you don't know what's wrong. And you look back on those past relationships and like it wasn't all bad. And so
No,
when it was really good,
absolutely
it was
not.
really good. And when it was really bad, it was really bad. And so you give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, exactly. And like in those relationships, I mean, I think if the scale had tipped to it was being mostly bad with some good, hopefully I would have clued in. But that wasn't the case. Like things were mostly good, but when they were bad,
Yeah.
they were not good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you cling on to those good times,
Yes.
and give people the benefit of the doubt. At least I did.
Yeah. I've also seen, I know we've talked about this off air as well, about seeing the potential in someone too much, or even reminiscing on how it was so good at the beginning, which was just a
Right.
lot of dopamine and a lot of hormones flying and that lust period. And so it's like we fixate on that moment and we're like, well, this is who they are, that
Right.
concept you've had in their mind, without actually seeing what they've become or the
Right.
masks that they've taken off.
Yeah, I definitely have a habit of falling in love with people's potential, what I see in them. You could do so much if you only did these things. Let me help you. Let
Yes.
me help you, reach that potential that I see in you. That was definitely a trend in all of my relationships. Yeah, all of them. And now it's a matter of like being conscious. Like I can't fall in love with a CV. I have to see, change or like action in the moment.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
So you have a healthy, stable relationship now. You two have been together for just over 2 years. Let us know what that was like meeting him and, those first few months of dating.
Right. So we met online. Who doesn't anymore these days? And I was curious about him. We started talking, and my goodness, this man could formulate entire paragraphs of sentences that were coherent and interesting. So that was really the first thing that kind of drew me in. It was like, wow, he's very good at expressing himself. We spoke very candidly, or at least, I spoke very candidly at the beginning, like I'm not interested in anything serious. I'm just kind of interested in meeting people. And, really what was my ultimate goal at the time was really just meeting people and seeing how that worked out. Learning more about people studying in a way. So I wasn't interested in anything serious, but at the same time, like I was curious about him. I was intrigued. So we met right before the first lockdown. We met online, and our first date had to be canceled because like the restaurants closed and all that. So I'm like, okay, well, you love soccer and I used to play soccer as a kid. Why don't we go like kick a ball around and have some fun? So our first date, we met up to play one-on-one soccer, which I think is so adorable. We still play soccer all the time. So that's been like an ongoing thing. But anyway, so we met, had a really, really fun time. I was a little bit smitten, like, oh, this is like a really interesting guy, very intelligent, kind of I had like there's a sense of intrigue there. And also part of that too was, you know, he didn't just like lay it all out.
Mm.
Like, here's everything about me and everything you need to know, and here are my wounds. Do your wounds match mine?
Yes.
There was none of that. So that I also found very curious. I'm like, I want to learn more about this person. So it was, you know, we talked actually to this day. I think we've like spoken every day, even if we don't see each other, we don't live together yet. But yeah, so it was very different from the beginning. And as our relationship progressed, and I didn't want to call it a relationship for a good almost 2 months. Like I had told him like, I'm not interested in anything serious. Like I don't want to fall into another relationship after, everything I've just been through and whatnot. And I realized at about like the 6 week mark that was like that huge fear was really that I was afraid of losing myself,
Mm.
because I thought I had learned so much in this year of being single and therapy and what have you, spiritual growth, personal growth, everything. I felt like I learned so much. I didn't want to screw it up, So I felt this fear of like, if we call this a relationship, like there goes this Emma that thinks she's learned everything, and I'm just going to fall back into the same patterns, and I'm going to lose myself and drain my capacity and not have time for me anymore. And like I didn't realize that that's really why I was scared of calling it a relationship. I just thought, oh, I just want to have fun, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, there was an underlying fear there that was all on me. And he was super respectful and did not even bring it up for like weeks and weeks. And it was about the, like I said, 5-6 week mark where I started realizing like we see each other like all the time. We talk every day. Things are lovely. I don't feel like I've been consumed by another person, or rather, I don't feel like I've allowed myself to like lose boundaries and lose my sense of self. So what's the problem here? Like, why am I so scared of calling this a relationship? Like, we've been in a relationship with no label since day one. So I was talking to our friend Claudia, and it hit me during our conversation. I'm like, I have been in a relationship. Like, I've just been kidding myself. So it was just after my birthday that he was like, I know you didn't want anything serious, but I was hoping that, we could maybe consider it. And I told him, it's like funny that you mentioned that, because just last week I came to the realization that we have been in a relationship. So I was like, let's put a label on it and see what happens.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
there's something so beautiful and valuable about not pressing to put a label on it.
Right.
Because when you
Yeah.
put a label on it, you're trying to maybe define something, that
Right.
you're trying to make something. You're
Right.
trying to create some security within your own mind by labeling something.
Right. That's true. Yeah. So it was interesting to be in that situation, especially as somebody who has been in very like, what would you call it? Relationships that started very quickly, and lasted a very long time without any sort of real like getting to know you time before that,
Mm-hmm.
like just flying by the seat of my limerent pants. Like that's
Yes.
how that was. So it was very interesting, being in a situation where I was consciously trying to get to know someone and also stay in my own lane.
Mm-hmm.
The best way to put it, I know I have this habit of trying to do things for other people to the point of putting myself last. And that's something that I've really learned about myself. So being with somebody and allowing them to do things for me, allowing them to do things for themselves, I honestly think my partner would not be interested in being with somebody who was like overbearing.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting that I'm with somebody that brings out this other side of me now and is allowing me to like learn how to receive, and also in that way kind of showing me a mirror of my subconscious and like where all my patterns have come from, patterns that you don't even realize.
Yeah. Also being a mirror to what you're ready for.
Yeah,
If you
absolutely.
say, I probably would not have attracted him. I wouldn't have been with him if I was
Yeah.
past Emma.
Oh, absolutely. Like, oh, I need to find somebody who needs me. That would have been past Emma, like, oh, this person's got it figured out. They don't need me. Like, what?
What has
So
what has that been like to redefine your value
of self,
of being in a relationship?
it's been a process. Like it's been confusing at times. I remember like earlier on thinking like, who am I in a relationship if I'm not the person who's doing everything for the other person and, taking care of everything for the other person? Like, what role do I have in a relationship? And eventually it hit me. The answer was very simple. My role is just to be myself. Like, what?
Mind blown.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I could just be me. And that's something that I realized a little bit further into our relationship, because those first few months of like, getting to know each other and learning what a healthy relationship feels like was very weird for me. what, there's no drama. I'm not anxious about, walking on eggshells. I'm not, what is this? Is this what a healthy relationship feels like? I literally had no clue. I had never been with someone like that, like where there was just no toxicity in any way.
I
Somebody
remember
that,
you even telling me, you're like, I feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop, but
yeah,
yet I feel like
yeah,
this feels good. It's you're in an
right.
uncharted territory of different energy.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I totally forgot about that. I did feel like I was waiting for some kind of big revelation of like, wow, it can't possibly be this
Right.
healthy.
You're like too good to be true. But it's interesting, those self-sabotaging narratives that come into our
Right,
head when we're used to something that was so toxic or drama filled or
right,
such spiked emotions all the time, when
yeah,
there's that very neutral, calm, open, expansive, loving energy, that
right,
healthy stability. It's almost like our nervous system doesn't know how to react in that situation.
right. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know what to make of things. It
Mm.
was completely, there's a concept in psychology called schemas. It's basically your way of grouping or organizing your reality. Right. So we have these schemas and like what a relationship should look like and what our work life should look like, what our friendships should look like, what the world is. We kind of like to, as humans, put things into categories and boxes. And we have like pre-existing categories and boxes based on what we've experienced growing up. Well, if you've never experienced a healthy relationship, you have no box to put that in. So that's what it felt like. I'm like, this doesn't fit into any boxes that I've experienced of what a relationship should be like, should feel like, all these things. So I had a lot of questions like, is this normal? Is it normal to like not feel this weird anxiety at the beginning of a relationship, or to have a relationship that deepens more gradually because you're not bonding over trauma and wounds? Your wounds aren't feeding into each other. So actually getting to know somebody takes a lot longer when you're not just like laying it all out on the table and like, here's, let's make sure our wounds match before we proceed.
Yeah, yeah.
So I didn't have a box to like put this in, and it was like really confusing.
Hmm.
It's funny looking back now, because now that I've like learned so much and it's been a couple of years, it's just, this feels normal now. Like I can't imagine being in relationships like the ones I'd had prior. I've created a box. I
Yeah.
get it now.
Yes.
I see what this is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that help you really understand that you create your own reality?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I 100% created my own reality.
Yes.
Or I was running on autopilot based on programming from childhood. And, that programming is, I think it's meant to be protective. Like you get sideswiped in childhood, you get hurt from friends or family or whatever, and you develop programming that's meant to protect you in some way, or to feed your sense of self, your ego. you know so while that programming is meant to be protective, it often is maladaptive.
Mhm.
You're playing things out in a way where, like, on the surface this should help me, but it really doesn't.
Yes.
In a lot of cases it really doesn't. I would say most of us have maladaptive programming that we have to, like, shed a light on and actually become aware of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see a correlation from, and we don't need to go in depth, but from the dynamic of the relationship with your parents and what you took on from that?
Oh, absolutely. My parents are amazing. Like, we came to this country when I was a kid, and that was not without difficulty. There were mental health issues, there were struggles, there were financial struggles, there were financial successes too. There were all these things, but how it all played out in my childhood. Like, you look back at your childhood and you think of it almost like a story with chapters. How it all played out really shaped me into who I am today. Like, I was exceptionally frugal for so long because of growing up, first having quite a lot of money and then not having that much money, and then all the bills and whatever. Like, that played into my, like, extreme frugality. Like, you met me when I was like embarrassingly frugal.
I think you were sewing holes in socks when I met you.
Okay, I still do that because we shouldn't be so wasteful in our culture.
Oh, I love you.
I was washing plastic bags before it was cool. We had a plastic crisis. Okay. I still do that though for that reason.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah, like I had a hard time, spending money because there was so much fear in that. And then like relationship dynamics, yeah, absolutely. Like I think I as a kid felt a sense of failure for like not being able to help more in my family and to alleviate the stresses and to alleviate, the pain and all that. So I think I grew up playing out this need to almost like atone for my guilt of not being able to do that as a child.
Mm,
So I went into relationships like, let me help, let me do everything, whatever, because I wasn't able to do that as a kid. Like, I think that's definitely an element of it. I think another aspect that plays into it for me is a sense of perfectionism. I received a lot of praise as a child from like teachers and parents and family friends for being very good at school and being like the perfect student, the perfect this and the perfect that. So that kind of lent itself to my relationships of like, I need to do this for the other person because if I let them do it, it won't be perfect. I'll do a better job and then things will be calm and there won't be any messes to fix. And if I just step in and do it myself. So there was that element too. Like, I think it's never necessarily one thing. It's like an interplay of like personality traits, dynamics, experiences growing up.
yes.
Yeah.
And then if we don't take the time to ask ourselves the hard questions and have the awareness and recognize what we're playing out or the patterns that are in our life and
Yeah.
doing the work, nothing ever changes. We can want to desire, we can want to change, but we need to change
Right.
first.
Absolutely. And so
First.
much of that is really it honestly, and to this day, like as we've talked about, like the work never finishes.
Yeah.
We're constantly doing work. And to
Yes.
this day, still things will, come up once in a while, like, oh, that's some baggage. Like, where did that come from? What
Yeah.
was that all about?
Yeah.
So it's a matter of being conscious of our decisions and where they come from. I think that really kind of ties into the whole concept of like cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a method of therapy where a person becomes aware of their triggers, becomes aware of their decisions, what decisions they're making and whatnot. And then because you're constantly checking in with yourself, like, oh, why did I make this decision? Did that come from like a healthy place or a maladaptive behavior or whatever? You're constantly checking in. So if you can tie that back in, you realize it's happening, tie it back into like why you made that decision, then you can actually change that decision.
Mm-hmm.
You can do something different, but first you have to actually be aware of it. That's the hard part, is like actually being
Yes.
aware of it in the first place.
And that's why they call it the work. And, hearing your story and other stories that are here on the Life Chat series, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's tiring. It can be very
If you
tiring.
had to do it again, would you do it again?
Of course.
Of course, because it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's funny. I look back and I may have said this in a previous episode. I don't remember, but I look back now at like pre 2019 Emma, and I'm like, she was starting to learn, but like it was like I was asleep. I was on autopilot. So much of what I was doing was really on autopilot. I feel like my eyes have opened in a lot of ways. And you know what? I'm sure in 5 years I'll look back at this time and be like, oh man, there was so much she needed to learn. Like she was so asleep. So I think it's just an ongoing process that we have to kind of take on.
It's rewarding though to feel that growth, to see those shifts.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you like, not to like poo-poo other people, everybody's on their own journey, but when you start doing that work and like you start doing a deep dive into yourself and you begin taking responsibility for your own decisions and actions and mistakes that you've made, you look around and you see a lot of people behaving on autopilot and making the same mistakes again and again. And it can be really hard to stay friends with people like that. You kind of sometimes have to let them go with love because they're stuck in a loop. There's nothing you can do, and a lot of times I think people find comfort in the known, even when the known is unhealthy. And people get stuck in their own stories of, their sometimes like their sense of victimhood or whatever. So, a lot of people will play out the victim mentality and just repeat the same mistakes again and again because like that's their identity. It can be really hard to maintain any sort of meaningful friendship. I mean, your friendships become superficial because you realize like your energy is being drained and you can't save this person. They have to do it for themselves. So yeah.
I'm so grateful for you. And,
I love you.
Yeah, we've grown so much together. Joe and I were just having a conversation this morning about exactly what you were talking about, seeing people still in the same loop and seeing people play out the same, we'll say, program. And I was like, why is it so hard for people to change? And we got talking about the ego. Like the ego wants to protect you. And in order for you to change, you have to turn that lens on yourself. And like what you did, how was I the cause of this? What was my role? What is my responsibility in that? And that takes so much vulnerability.
Yeah, it does. For me, there was almost like no other option though, because it was so painful.
Right.
But the thought of like, my God, if I don't figure out why this happened, like I don't want to go through this again.
Yeah. But that's why you look at like, I've really seen you commit to the work now because of going through that. And so many people, whether it's a life threaten or an accident or lose your job or divorce, something that like shakes up your entire reality. COVID did that a lot for a lot of people as well, until you're, and I do believe the universe will knock on your door a couple times, but it'll hit you over the face if you don't listen enough.
That's exactly what happened with me. Like I didn't listen to the lessons that I was being presented with for so long. I had to be hit in the face with it. Like that's really what it felt like. And it felt that way doubly so because as we talked about on that previous episode, like I had this huge high of realizing like my potential and how much I was holding myself back and all like whoa, my mind just completely was blown that day. And I felt this incredible rush of like excitement and energy and like creative energy. It was like the universe's creative energy like flowing through me. It was so incredible, only to be followed by like the worst months of my life. Worst, I would not trade it. There was so many silver linings and obviously so many realizations and growth that came, but I almost feel like those two things had to happen back to back for me to really feel that contrast and to really be hit in the face with it. Yeah. So I'm grateful. I mean, I wouldn't have had the realizations I've had and I wouldn't be here without that. I mean, there's that saying, what is it? There is no growth without discomfort.
Yeah. Change happens outside your comfort zone, all those. Yes.
Yeah. We have to turn pain into growth. I think that's what it's really for.
Yeah. I've learned to really lean into contrast. It's there for a reason. It's interesting. Like the past year, I realized, wow, like I'm meant to feel joy. I'm meant to feel fulfilled. Like we're brought up in this world of darkness and you need to struggle in this hustle culture and it's hard to do this and you need to suffer for that. No, you don't need to, if you're recognizing the warning signs and the red flags soon enough of that small discomfort. And I look at it like lowering my pain threshold, not tolerating as much as I did. And I've seen you do that as well. As soon as you notice you're outside of that ideal state, that higher self that you want to live in, it's like, oh, what's going on here? How can I recognize the shift that I need to make?
Yeah, exactly. It's such a process. Like that awareness is such a process. Yeah. Right. It's been a journey.
Yes. Wonderful, my friend. We're going to come back on part 4. I want to dive more into programming, conscious, subconscious. You have some great examples of doing the work in the moment, with your new bow of like about to react one way and then catching yourself or seeing yourself play out an old program, which is how you really change. Change happens in the moment where you can have that conscious awareness of almost like a third party objective. Yeah. Where it's like you zoom out, you're like, whoa, this is happening. Yeah. Awesome. So we're gonna come back for that. So stay tuned for part 4. Whoa. Thank you for joining me on this episode today. My website, simplysarah.com, is a great place for me to continue to support you on your journey to alignment, joy, and fulfillment. There you will find upcoming retreats that I am hosting, resources, books, and many other helpful tools to help you on your travels through this thing called life.